The Swell Season Podcast is recorded by the Newsstand Studio at Rockefeller Center in the heart of Manhattan and is distributed by the Swell Season Surf Radio Network.
I'd like to take you on a nostalgia trip, if I may. Excuse me, Stan. All the way back to the year 1959. Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere waiting for me, my lover stands on Tommy Sands, watching the ships that go sailing somewhere beyond the sea.
Hello, and welcome to the Swell Season Surf Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Brewer. Joining me for this episode is our new Swell Season contributor, Catherine Mao. She is an incredible photographer and a mentor at La Ribea. Her expertise will come in handy for this episode's guest. Catherine, how's it going?
Hi there. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Super stoked to have you as a co-host here. I've been wanting to get you on the show for a while, so this was a really great way to do it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Oh, it's going to be very fun, and we have an awesome guest.
Yes, we do. I'm excited.
Are you?
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna now make them blush with reading off their intro here, and it's going to be really fun. All right, ready? Here we go. Our guest for this episode is originally from Montreal, Canada, but is now a Brooklyn-based freelance photographer. She is a self-taught photographer as well, and the founding director of the Camera of the Month Club, an NYC photography collective. She was a Nikon scholarship winner at the Santa Fe Photography Workshops and an artist member of the Soho Photo Gallery in New York City. Her latest book project is called Beach Lovers, a series of intimate moments shared by couples at the beaches of New York City. These moments hold intimate gestures of couples, some tender, rubbing sunscreen on a partner's back, others lustful, a deep kiss in the water. Being amongst the waves and sand emboldens couples to enjoy more affectionate freedom, their inhibitions less hidden than anywhere else observed in the city. Beach Lovers is about the public display of intimacy between couples from diverse backgrounds, a claiming of public space for the private tenderness. We are excited to welcome to the show Erica Reade. Erica, thank you so much for being a guest on this show. I'm so psyched, and I've been following your journey for a while, as we talked before, not in a creepy way, but just like really admiring your work.
Thank you.
I've been following this journey of this book, actually,
Thank you so much.
It's super cool. So thank you for coming on.
I'm so excited to be
Erica.
here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be speaking with you guys.
I hope it didn't make you blush too much.
No,
Right?
I feel like I was hearing my artist statement read aloud.
It was.
Like poetry. So it was lovely.
It was.
Thank you so much.
I lifted it off your bio page. Yeah. Not gonna lie.
It's a great artist statement.
So I wanted to dive in here because I find this really interesting. You're a self-taught photographer, but you also worked in the nonprofit world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, we're just going to go right into the meat of this here. But I'm really curious, how did that decision to leave your full-time position in nonprofit and commit to photography? What was that like? And that must have been a really anxious period, but also exciting.
Yeah, it was, I think anytime we have these huge life changes, it's like things have been brewing and percolating for a while. So it was a combination of almost a decade of working in dysfunctional, low-paying jobs, but so well-meaning. So it was really hard for me to leave. Having just, a body of work that was getting stronger and stronger, and then picking up freelance classes. And I was taking workshops a lot at the Santa Fe photo workshops. And I'm also Canadian. So being on a visa here,
Sorry.
no. I actually don't say it anymore. It kind of makes me sad. I'm going home for the first time next month. So it'll come back strong.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I was always tied to a job with my former visa, so I really didn't have a lot of wiggle room. And then I changed the visa I was on, which is an artist visa. So I had the freedom to be a freelancer.
Wow.
And it was one of those years of like, now or never. I'm not getting any younger. I really care about photography. I was making like $30,000 a year. Like, it just was like, if I'm going to struggle, I might as well do it on my own terms.
Mm-hmm.
And over the first early years of Beach Lovers, I was seeing like little inklings of what it could become, and it just felt like time. And then there, as much as we're in like a shit economy, there are always jobs. Worst case, if it didn't work out, I could get another job. But being my own boss, like it just felt like time to do it. And I was juggling part-time nonprofit for a bit and freelance, and it was just both were burning me out. And so it was just, honestly, I was like so excited to quit my job when it happened. So no regrets. I mean, the pandemic year was like rough. 2020 was like
scary
AF, but I'm now where I am now. It's like all been worth it, and super would not go back to an office job anytime soon. So
it's something I think many of us struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
I know I sometimes is definitely a time where I'm like, oh, fuck, I should just take a risk. But then it's really difficult to leave certain securities
of course,
too.
Absolutely.
A steady paycheck is, it is such a shackle sometimes.
Yeah. And again, especially with the pandemic having no security, it really reminded me of that. But the unfortunate thing about nonprofit work is that you don't have many other benefits besides the steadiness. It's not a big paycheck.
Yeah.
Right.
Most of my jobs didn't give me health care. Like it was just like not even worth, like if I had come from like a government job or a corporate job, maybe it would have been a little more of a pull, but you're already not being that well valued. It was like, well, I can at least.
Nonprofit work is incredibly exhausting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of like interacting with other people and asking other people for things, which is like a social labor.
Yep.
That like people don't really talk about as much, I think.
Yeah.
What were you doing in the nonprofit?
So the first sort of 5 years, I came for grad school, and I was very lucky. Like an internship turned into a job. I was in more of the international field, so I was doing a lot of women's rights work, and was super lucky. Was getting to travel everywhere. But I'm sure it's maybe people know, like sometimes traveling with work is not as exciting as it sounds. And I was like burning out, getting sick, picking up viruses in other countries. So I decided to switch to more local New York work. So I actually worked at a couple of different nonprofits teaching young people photography, and great stuff. It's like it kind of bittersweet because it was such great work. And so my work from like 2011 up until 2018 was all the arts. Like it was photography, writing, video, and all working with teenagers in New York of using photography for social good, for their own healing, to spread a positive message. So amazing work. But then on like the inner workings were just, didn't align. And that's the unfortunate thing about nonprofit work here is like, if you don't have, and also like didn't have like a wealthy partner or husband or father, like I just didn't have other support. So it really was just like, why am I doing this? So
let me ask you, because you were teaching it to a lot of these kids. Did that help sharpen your skill?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think it's a bit corny and cliche, but it's true. Like you learn as much from your students as you're teaching, or you should be if you're a good teacher. Like I never went in assuming I knew that much. I was teaching them like the basics, and then like watching what they did with the janky cameras we could afford to give them. But I mean, I learned so much from them. I was, the projects that we would come up with at the same time, always, I was still always doing my own work evenings and weekends and taking classes where I could.
And these are kids that are from New York City.
Yeah, they were all
right?
New York City kids.
Right.
So you also learn a lot from just like native kids, like who were in some ways like more worldly than I was, So
I can imagine it influenced your perspective on New York a lot.
Yeah, it did.
It informed it.
Yeah. Well, it definitely did. Yeah. I mean, I had kids who'd never been to the Rockaway, so I would take them on our summer trips to like see a beach for the first time. So that was like really cool to like get to have that experience.
How did you discover New York beaches? So you came from Montreal. You surf, but I would guess that you didn't learn to surf in Montreal. I know there are surf schools on the river and everything, but I'm curious, like how you found the New York City oceans, basically.
I mean, I don't like winter and never have. I grew up in one of the coldest cities in the world, and it just sort of broke me by the time I moved here. Even though New York is not like warm, it's just not even
warmer than Montreal.
Yeah, it's just and shorter. It's just like a shorter season. Yeah. Honestly, I think it was just even the first year I lived here, I was like, oh, summers get really effing hot here. Like I need to go for a swim. And I don't know if it's truly just like a Google search, but I think I went to Coney once and I was like, this is cool, but it's kind of dirty. And then
the Russian food's nice and bright, and that's about it.
It's great for people watching and great for photography. But if you're into street photography, documentary, like, and no shade to any Coney Island listeners, it has its own beauty. But it was honestly like the first full year of living here. I just found, I think it was just Google, and I was just like, oh, there's a train that goes to the beach in Rockaway, and I got off and I was like, okay, hooked for life. And that was
what year was this?
2007. So my whole like time living here. And then by like 2011, I discovered Fort Tilden, which is like down south of that peninsula. And that I fell even more in love with. And it's just been like year round. I just go as often as I can. I just love it out there so much.
And how did you pick up surfing then? Because this is a surf podcast.
I
think we should really get a little bit of that.
I'm lucky enough that I have a core group of friends, and we are all very beach bummy. And a friend and I had been going to Rockaway for a few years. We'd been like kind of seeing surfers, and then we were like, we should just take a surfing lesson. And just same thing by fluke, we're on Google. And it was the era where like Groupon was a cool thing.
Yes.
And I'm sure you guys know that. Local surf school had just opened. Yes. And I still like to proudly say I was like one of local's first surf lessons
I
ever.
teach for locals.
No way. Oh, that's so funny. So it was like, well, I don't want to say their prices, but like it was an insanely good deal.
It was different, I'm
Very
sure.
different. So it was like
Groupon deal.
Was it just the mics at that time?
It was just the mics at that time. Blonde mic and brown mic. And that's what they told us to call them. And we
self-endorsed everyone.
Exactly. And we bought like a package of 3. We took our first lesson in June, second lesson a couple weeks later, and then the third lesson, and we were like everyone, like hooked. So we started renting boards and just doing it. And I took lessons from them for like a few years just because you don't really get good right away.
Yes.
It's very hard.
And then, started renting boards. And then I finally bought a board. I was renting a locker at the marina for a couple of years. Got really lucky with some surf trips. I did a yoga teacher training, and I was surfing in Costa Rica. So I've done a few like Peru, Barbados.
Where in Peru were you?
It was just outside of Lima, just like a little surfing beach there. And then, out here as well. So, never, because I live in Brooklyn, had the amount of dedication you could, make to Rockaway 5-day a week surfing. But
this is a thing that a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, but I don't surf that well, or I don't surf that much. But I'm like, you commute from Brooklyn or New York City with a board and a wetsuit to the beach.
It's the froth.
When you do that, I feel like you earn your status already. That's a level of commitment that not a lot of people in other wave-rich areas have.
Right.
So to me, like, Yeah. No,
I mean,
you're good.
Thank
You're good. You're
the
good.
Thank you.
commitment is there. I think it bonds us. I also
Yeah.
think it's like the conditions aren't always so great. So when
Right.
it's really great, it's like everyone's on cloud nine.
Exactly.
Even if it's okay, everyone's just stoked to be there because
Yeah.
we all worked really hard to be there
Exactly.
and to make the time for it. So there's like definitely a lot of community. There's an aura to
Yeah.
it.
There
out
is.
Misery
here.
loves
There is.
company.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you, do you feel like your fascination in terms of like the subject of the beach? Because actually, funnily enough, I was born in Montreal.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
and
so cool.
I didn't grow up there. I grew up in China mostly, but I didn't grow up surfing either. I actually only started surfing about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
And I got really lucky too. I mean, most of it was like COVID. So like after the first 6 months I started, I just like had all the time in the world to commit to it.
Sure.
And I had a lot of friends who were big surfers. I have always skated, which is how I got into surfing.
Okay.
But like I was not a big beach person before I like started surfing.
Okay.
I had already been in New York for 6 years, and I think I'd only been to like Rockaway one time.
Oh wow.
And now I'm in Rockaway like
All the
every
time.
day.
Yeah.
My studio is actually in the marina.
Oh cool.
Yeah, a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
overlaps. But what I was going to say was I feel like it's so interesting because I would have started surfing when I was 24. It's so interesting like how deeply I've felt the desire to like dive into beach culture, surf culture, and everything. And like it feels easy, but at the same time, I'm always like, is it because I have like these like baby's eyes?
Mm.
You know what I mean? About everything. And like my friends and I always joke when you start surfing at an older age, like you're kind of a grom immediately.
Mhm.
Like you're 10 again.
Right.
You know, and then
Right.
like every year past that first time you surfed, you gain like 3 years on that year, but like you're like still only going from 10 to like 13 to like 16.
Right.
You've kind of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I always think it's really like your photos are beautiful and I feel like capture a lot of like the tenderness that you're describing in your work. And do you think that comes from that perspective of like having grown up maybe not by the water, because there's a lot of water in Montreal,
Mhm.
obviously,
Mhm.
but just not in the same environment of the beach or of the surfing
The
community.
beach culture. Even,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a few things. I think some of us who come here from other places who aren't
Mhm.
native New Yorkers,
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but like as much as this is one of the hardest, I still love this city. Like this is going to be my 16th year here, and it's like it'll beat you up and spit you out, and then you like something good happens. You're like, oh, I love it here. So, and how is that connected to your answer? But so I didn't grow up in like the biggest city, and I didn't grow up by a beach, but I loved summers. I loved lakes and rivers, and I think I'm a weirdo. I like the weird hot humidity here in New York in the summer. Like it doesn't really bother me. I don't even have AC. Like I'm really
Damn.
intense with summer.
Okay.
So maybe it is like almost like a full 180 reaction to like
Yeah.
the negative winters I was growing up in.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I think obviously you both know this feeling, but I mean, the ocean is just therapy. I mean, you can't be in a bad mood at the beach for more than 10 minutes. Like you go for a swim and it's like life is just better. And so I think I've said this a few times. Like, I don't think I would have lasted in New York as long as I have if we weren't
Right.
like a coastal city. Like if this was just like, I don't know, Houston, like bye, but like
No
we
offense,
have,
Houston.
yeah,
Or
no,
Dallas.
or to
you know,
anyone,
whatever.
to anyone who's a
But no
landlocked
more
city.
landlocked.
Yeah, I could never go back to like a not water-based city at this point. So I think it was a few things. I mean, it's like I said this to someone else. It's just like you see a happiness and lightness in people at the beach in New York that you don't see it even in parks or like we just like really relax at the beach here. We just like come down. There's like the facade, the coolness that we all wear in the city kind of just like, I mean, there's still some of that in surf culture and like Rockaway, like sure, there's like cliques and groups, but there's still, I don't know, like we all, like you said, we all get it. We're all beach bums. We're all just like, we're there. And it's so special to New Yorkers because we only really have 3.5 months to like really I mean, now September is essentially summer to me.
Right.
When people start
Right.
bringing out pumpkins in September, it is like my biggest pet peeve because I'm like, you guys, it's still
It's
summer
still
for
summer.
another
Pumpkin
month.
spice
yeah.
latte,
I can't.
September
Yeah.
1st.
It's
Come on.
too much. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a few things. I mean, people are like really like the way I saw couples interacting at the beach, like someone like, you know, putting your girlfriend or boyfriend on your shoulders and running into the water. Like you don't do that
Mhm.
stuff in like Midtown or like
Mm.
the park. So there is a childlikeness that comes out, I think, in everyone at the
Mhm.
beach, whether it's surfing or just like swimming.
Mhm.
So
I-
don't know if I really answered your question, but
No,
like
it was a very convoluted question. I guess it was more just like, I mean, to be a photographer that walks into a space,
Mhm.
right, and is able to capture, honestly, like these are really not just intimate, but really like sometimes even short-lived,
Mhm.
right, gestures
Mhm.
and like that are very fleeting,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And I think it takes a lot of self-awareness, but also the awareness of everything around you to
Mhm.
even like see that moment and just take that shot,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And people who, when you grow up, not people, when anybody grows up in a space that they're constantly in that space, they're constantly immersed in that visual culture, might not, it's not that they don't appreciate those moments, but those moments seem mundane or
Right.
normal
Right.
Mhm.
or routine.
Sure.
And so I'm wondering, yeah, my question really is like for you, like, does your eye come from the fact that like the beach is something that you've had to learn and not something that was like,
That's a
Can-
good question.
I want to
yeah.
Inherited.
tack, I want to
Yeah.
tack on to that too. So I
Yeah.
think there's something about not only that, but you're not a formally trained photographer, right?
Mm.
Right.
And there's this outsider perspective,
Right.
not just with the beaches, but also with your photography too.
Right.
It like Kat and I were discussing this yesterday, how sometimes when you're not totally formally trained, it allows you to see without the borders that
Mhm.
come
Right.
with the formal training.
Right, right.
And
Mhm.
and I think there's something to what Kat's saying here with like you're coming to the beach with brand new
Right.
grommet filled eyes,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And I would say that's also having to do with your art, your photography too,
Right.
potentially.
Right.
So I guess that's kind of like, is that something that you're aware of? That kind of
I think
outsider perspective?
I think so because I think I had a lot of, for lack of a better, like a lot of imposter syndrome for a while about calling myself a photographer and not having
Very
gone,
real.
yeah, not having gone to school for it. And like 10 years ago, it felt like, I mean, somewhat of a boys club. Like it just felt like not, I was like trying to always prove myself. And then when I
Mhm.
got over that part, it was also like, if I'm going to take this seriously, I need to like go to a critique or go to a review. And had years of like terrible critiques and reviews and like so many rejections and so many people being like, you shouldn't quit your day job. What are you talking about? Like, bye. So I had to be like humbled over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And something you mentioned in my intro bio, like I didn't have the money to go back to school and I wasn't really liking what I saw. So I was like, I should just start a photo club and just like meet once a month with other people.
Mhm.
And it was really instrumental in getting this series to where it was. Cause like
Mhm.
it's super easy to take photos of people lying in the sand. And that was maybe like the first year or so of it was, they were good. But like after a certain point, someone was like, well, Erica, if you're going to make this a project, like
Mhm.
you need to diversify. You need to get people standing up, sitting down, daytime, nighttime. Like you need to really like,
Mhm.
and so having my own outsiders helped because you can't just like work. It's very like, as I'm
Absolutely.
sure you know, photography can be really lonely. Like it's just you
Yeah.
and your camera. So when you have other people responding to your work,
Yeah.
yeah, it really helped. So I think it was like, there's always a small part of me that I was like, not trying to prove myself, but I was trying to be like, okay, I just got rejected. I'm not quitting. Like, let me, maybe a bit like surfing. It's like you wipe out and you're like, okay, I'm going to get back up and do this all over again. When I was younger, my ego was like, when I wasn't good at something, I would just quit. And that's not a mature way to go about life if you're passionate about something. So it was probably a bit of an outsider thing. It was like, kind of, you guys are bringing up great points. Like it was kind of a mix of all of these things of just like, I want to get really good at something.
Yeah.
I know that this series is going to speak to people it's still not quite there yet. And so it was like years of going back and like kind of like knowing what I was looking for and knowing kind of like what was missing and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Feedback is really important.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, I mean, it's like death of the artist. I mean, like you don't make art for yourself.
Right.
I mean, you're putting it out there in the world. So there's going to be a diverse amount of people who will see it. And so before you put it out there, like you can't just rely on your perspective or your own eyes. And so that's not to invalidate the artist's perspective. It's just to say that we don't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
It's if it's not collaborative, it requires more than one pair of eyes or one brain.
For
right.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of makes me think like, how long were you shooting these for essentially? Like what sort of years are these photos coming from? And I mean, in terms of your selection process, because it sounds like you went through a lot of selection.
Yeah.
Like how many photos
that's a great question.
were you running through?
I started in early 2015. I didn't start out to shoot this. It was just like truly a happy accident. I saw some couples on the beach and they looked very romantic and I had a film camera with me. So I didn't even know what the outcome was going to be. I got the film developed and I was like, oh, this is... And I had just come from like a crushing rejection a few months earlier. So I was feeling so like, should I just give up on photography? And so it was like when I finally found something I was excited about, I became honestly a little obsessive. I mean, I went back 2015. I shot like there are photos in the book that are right up through September 2021, like up until last year. I was shooting that. I'm probably going to keep shooting it, but so every year it was like, you know, you shoot hundreds of couples and then you pare down to like your strongest 5 to 10. And so once I felt like I had a pretty like solid body of work was when I decided I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna do a book. But yeah, it was lots of feedbacks, lots of entering it into different, you know, getting it in front of people's eyes and getting feedback. So, and then part of the push, I think we've all had these weird, like the pandemic was both the darkest, but also some of the best silver linings of my life at the same time. It was like, there was a moment, I don't know if the two of you had this, where I was like, we're not going to the beach this summer. Like, what am I going to do for 3 months if I can't go to the beach? Like,
I stayed away for like 2.5 months.
Oh my gosh.
When the waves were pumping in like March, April. And for me, I was like looking on the Surfline cam, watching perfectly peeling waves, and I'm like, I don't want to risk it yet. I'm not sure what's going on, and I don't want to be that jerk who gets hurt and then ends up in the emergency room and you know, wasting resources. So yeah, it was that we were all, I think, facing that kind of like, what the fuck is gonna happen here?
So
Absolutely.
you know, as we all kind of came back out that June and I got back to the beach, it was like the series felt even more important to do. I mean, I was doing it a bit more cautiously and at a distance, but it was definitely the push of like, do this now, or like I'd been talking about a book for forever, and it was like, okay, it's time to like shoot a few more. Like there was a few in 2020. I was like, I really want to get like these kind of shots. And I knew a few more would come the following year, but yeah, it was just, so yeah, it's like 7 years of shooting that came to a big body, which went down to a smaller body. And then I worked with the actual editor from the publicist who then made her final cut, which I did approve. So I handed her 90 and we cut it down to 66. So it was rough.
Wow. Hard. It's hard. It's much harder to pare down.
Yeah, very.
Editing
very.
is very difficult.
It's rough.
And especially when you're so attached to it, it's like, it's so hard to let go. And having that publisher, you know, having someone there to be like, no, this is it. This is what you need to cut. It's a really difficult process, but it's also kind of rewarding too, because I think you learn a lot from someone else like coming in and cutting out, because you're like, I guess I can kind of see what they're saying.
For
you know?
sure, for sure.
Yeah.
She made a lot of amazing decisions that I probably wouldn't have been able to make on my own.
It's so easy to edit sometimes. It's like it's because you're so not attached. You know, when it's not your work and looking at someone else's, you're like, nah, cut this. I'm like, what? And you're like, no, you need to do it. And we will be right back. And now back to our show. I gotta ask, like, and Kat and I, we were talking about this yesterday. I'm gonna try to show some photo knowledge here, but like your photos like really reminded me of Fred Conrad's pictures of sunbathers in the shadow of like the World Trade Center.
Oh yeah,
you seen those?
Oh, I love those. Yeah,
like there's something about them that's like very eternal, and like and your photos really reminded me of that, because your photos could almost be 50 years ago. You know, they could be any time in the last 50 years. I feel like your images could be. And was it a deliberate choice to go black and white right from the beginning?
Yes, two-part answer.
Yeah.
I realized too, not intentionally, but there are no phones or masks in the book. So that was not so intentional, but also like, I'm glad that there aren't, because for that reason. But the happy accident, like I said, of the first photos I took of this happened to be a black and white roll of film. So that was just like how I first ever stumbled into it. And once, because I developed a roll of film and I was like, it didn't make any sense to go color. And it's like, for me, one of my more exciting things to tell people is always like the cover of the book is one of those original photos I shot the first summer on film. And it was like, this photo was like, this made me feel like, oh, I'm kind of good at photography. I guess I can not quit now. But yeah, I there's just, you know, as you both know, the beach is like overwhelming with color. It's like the orange lifeguard chairs, the water, the harsh sun. And I wanted this to be about like the emotion and the moments and the timelessness, and like, you know, studied a lot of previous New York street photographers and just felt like black and white was the right choice for that timeless feeling. So yeah, that was actually like one of the easier decisions of this project, was like black and white from the get-go. I do a lot of other color work, but this was like, this had to be black and white. I
love it because when I look at that, it really brings up so much nostalgia to me. Like it really feels like I could place this. I mean, I think anyone who looks at this can place it to any time period that they may have lived in New York. You know, that's what I think is so cool. And that's why I think the book is great, is that so many people can relate when they see that. Because it's like, oh yeah, this reminded me when I went to the Rockaways or when I went to Coney Island, you know?
I've had a lot of older grandparent type people say that to me, and it's just like, it's so cute that like, they're like, oh, that was me and my husband. We met on the beach in the 60s. So those moments like made it all worth it. Really,
that's how my grandparents met.
Yeah, no
Brighton
way.
Beach, you know, on the beach. My grandfather picked up my grandmother on the beach in Brighton. So I mean,
that's so cute.
That's totally.
It still happens, everyone.
It does. It totally does. Yeah.
I love that though. So that to me was really.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I love black and white, and I've always liked how ethereal it is and timeless it is. I have two questions. First being, like, were you always shooting film? Did you move over to digital? And like, sort of like, how has the equipment that you were using while you were shooting these, like, were you, I like to shoot analog. I like to I have like this like Rollei 35S, just is like literally half the size of an iPhone. And I think it is the best camera I own because it's easy. Right. I don't think we need to be so fixated on equipment.
No,
I personally don't believe in that. But yeah, how does how are the what are the tools you're using? And how does that affect your process or how you can exist in that space as a photographer? But yeah, answer that question.
That was a great question. Yeah. No, I mean, I wanted it to be all film from the get-go, but by the second year of shooting it, between the cost of film and, the beach is hard on cameras. Yeah. So I've gone through maybe 10 cameras to do this, so I had to, and because, I really, when I shot 2016 to me was my weakest year of photos for this project. And that was a year I got a lot of feedback of things I should change. And at that point, even though we all love film, the reality of like digital is like you can just really just like shoot and shoot and shoot and like really just like go after it. And I really made a commitment to like, I'm going after work, I'm going on the weekends, I'm going as much as I could. And like just truly financially, I just could not afford to do film. So I just invested in like small little mirrorless cameras and wanted it to be something incognito enough that people, you know, I imagine this might come up, but just to say it, like I wasn't asking for permission for these photos. So I wanted something small enough that people, I wasn't like photographer with the massive camera with the zoom lens and and I'm of the same belief, like it's not the gear, it's your eye. And
you could have shot this on iPhone, I wouldn't have cared.
I'm not ashamed to say that there are 3 photos here. No,
as you should. You know what, and the thing is in reality, like as an artist, as a photographer, filmmakers, it doesn't matter. And like to gatekeep and say that it matters, like maybe if you want to make a blockbuster film.
Sure, I mean, I have 3 photos in the book that were on my phone, and I have no shame about that. Like,
well,
and I respect that.
You get so much better by doing that. You can improve your technique so much more in a much faster time period, as opposed to having to wait for your film to be developed and then seeing the result and not really get that instantaneous oh, I could have done this a little bit better, and then you can make that adjustment right away.
Right.
It's crazy the trajectory you can experience now.
Yeah,
totally.
I mean, film has its time and place. And like it's not always necessary, and that's something I have to remind myself too all the time, because I do have like sometimes I'm like, I know how to use like a film camera better than I know how to use digital cameras, and I'm like, oh, like that's not, you have to learn everything, you know? But I guess, the question of like permission, which is like highly debated.
Sure, of course.
In the photo world.
Always comes up.
I said to Tyler yesterday, I was like, you know, what I really do, what I love about your photos is not only are they so intimate and there's so many gestures, but also like from what I had seen already, like there was no clear faces in them. And I even posed this question to Tyler. I was like, what do you think? Like, were you thinking about that as you were shooting? Was that something that came into mind in the selection process? Because it is really hard. Because if you ask somebody, then you lose the moment. But, you know, like there are ethical frameworks that I think as photographers and artists that we should be sort of having that kind of dialogue internally.
That's all great questions. Because the first couple of years were so much experimenting and figuring out what it was, I did try for like a month to ask people, and it went terribly. The moment was lost, or they didn't really get my vision, or I wasn't explaining it well. I got really shy, and like none of those photos came out. And so then I was like, okay, I'm getting such better work when I'm not asking permission. And you know, frankly, I know, again, ethical, but like that is what street photography is. Like there's no street photographer asking permission. We're just all shooting New York City. But I was very aware that, you know, we're mostly undressed and very intimate on the beach. So for me, one of my major measures was like, if I were to open this book or go to a gallery and see my body there, would I be okay with it? And if my answer, if I had a weird gut no, like I felt not comfortable with, if that had been someone taking that of me, that I was always drawing the line of like, so a ton of photos didn't make the series or have never been published, or I wouldn't show people because they felt exploitive or too much or voyeuristic. And I was really always aware that I was doing something that might not sit well with everyone. And I think I kind of just also boil it down to like, I was just doing this out of a place of respect and love. Like I was just seeing these really beautiful moments, and they were happening anyway, right? Like people were doing these things very publicly, and I've seen like very explicit things happen on the beach that I did not photograph, or else again were not in the book.
20 years ago, I saw some crazy ass shit happen on the beach.
Absolutely.
Some wild stuff. So I was trying to you know, like a trifecta of like keeping my own like, would I be comfortable with this? Obviously always going back to the critiques and getting feedback from other people. Largely faces aren't recognizable either. And just really wanting it to feel like a nostalgic series about love and romance and just intimacy at the beach, and like not like, what can I get away with? Like it was never about being sneaky or like trying to get people when they weren't looking. And frankly, some people either saw me and didn't care, or they were so into each other, I would get real close, they didn't notice me. So I would really read the energy of the couple, and like if people like, if I could sense like a freezing up or a suspicion, I would just keep moving. Like I was never trying to force things on people. Absolutely. So, you know, you do see some more famous street photographers who like go right up and like grab someone's face, and like that's just not my style. So that's kind of how I have.
I'm just imagining you like walking up, and then all of a sudden someone looks and you're like,
I mean, a couple of times I like had a couple of tricks. Like sometimes I would pretend to be on like a phone call and like, snap, or like sometimes I would have to sort of be a little bit coy about it.
The digital allows you to be more quiet too.
Yeah, totally.
You know, than a film, I imagine.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because I do think like a lot of street photographers, you can't learn that, right? It's not just about the eye. It's also like your personality.
Right.
Like, I know for me, I really struggle with like taking photos of people in public places. Yeah. And I remember like one time in my program, we did like an exercise for a filmmaking class, and we were just like supposed to go out and like kind of voyeuristically film something happening in public, like, you know your boundaries, right?
Yeah.
And I remember there was somebody in my class, and I was like, wow, you are perfect for this. Like you are so unashamed, unabashed. Like, and I mean, and it's crazy, right? Because like, that's not something I don't think I'll ever be able to do, which is like, if someone caught me taking a photo of them, I would honestly run. I would run away.
If it helps though, this comes back to what we dove into earlier. I tried to be a street photographer in Manhattan, and I no, like it was really the beach that made this easy.
Interesting.
So
the masks you shed, right?
Yeah, like I don't like street photography. Like I don't like doing it. I respect and I love street photography of other people who do like Manhattan and Brooklyn, but like I never felt a desire to. I didn't even like to call myself one. Like I just so I think it also like, when the environment is right for you, it felt more easy to do this. But same, like I wouldn't want to like, I have a couple of friends who like come to Midtown on purpose to shoot street. And like, that is my worst nightmare. Like I would never, but they do great work. And just like for them, they're like, oh, you're always at the beach. Like, don't you hate the sand? And I'm like, no.
The sand kills cameras though.
Right. I mean, it does. It totally does. But
no, I understand what you're saying.
But the kind of public, not public, private part of it felt just easier at the beach than like, here. Yeah.
Well, like you said, everyone's stripped down too, in a sense that you go to the beach knowing that you're exposing yourself.
Yeah.
There's almost like a weird safety feeling of going to the beach in your bikinis, board shorts that you would never wear in the streets here. But there's like, it's amazing. I find it amazing at how bold people actually are on the beach with what they wear, how they present themselves, how they carry themselves. Totally. And I think it's almost different than what they would do in their regular clothing, in their outfits almost, or their costumes, basically. Because we all portray ourselves a certain way here on land, but on the beach, it's like, you go through this metamorphosis, this transition into a different person, I think.
Yeah.
That's funny because before the podcast started, we all bonded about having gone to new school. And it was one of the things that stuck with me the most. One of my professors said, in the most academic way you can study the beach, she said, the beach is the most democratizing public space there is, because you can't see if someone's rich or not. I mean, like maybe little hints of like how nice a board is, but like really,
it can be.
Yeah.
Depends on where.
Sure.
In New
Different
York City.
frameworks,
In New York
different,
City,
yeah,
for
different
sure.
spaces.
But like
yeah.
overall, there's just something that's like an equalizing. Like we're all
Yeah.
out there with like sunscreen and like
Yeah.
our bodies and the boldness and like everyone. There's a boldness. There's also like a shyness. Like we're
Yeah.
all like exposed. So I think we're all doing and feeling things on the beach that we're not doing and feeling anywhere else.
Yeah.
It is like, like I feel like that's why I always love about surfing in New York City, particularly compared to most other places I've traveled to. You really have no fucking clue who you're surfing with
Very
sometimes,
true.
which is amazing because that kook that you may want to shout at or whatever, could be a giant CEO or a big artist or whatever, or it could be the plumber that you need. It's amazing. And so I think it actually really allows for a more often than not a friendlier lineup because you really don't know who is who. And like you said, it's a much more democratized zone.
Right.
Or it's based off of maybe like a different type of hierarchy.
Sure. I mean, it's not perfect,
Yeah.
but there is just like a freedom there. And like you can't really tell what walk of life someone is from all the time.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go to Fort Tilden here.
Sure.
Because I think you have captured a time period that may not be around for much longer because they are talking about changing, tearing down that structure there. And Fort Tilden has become like this gathering area for LGBTQ plus community particularly. And that area is going to potentially change in the near future. They're talking about tearing down the building there. And there's that one section where the waves are really good, by the way.
Right.
And I know. But I love it because every time I come in, there's always someone who has a really nice thing to say about my surfing, because they're very enthusiastic. But it's like, but I think it's really cool because I think you've really captured a moment that may not last for a while. And I don't know if you've had time to reflect on that or thought about that.
I haven't quite more because I also distinguish between Fort Tilden and Jacob Riis because I think you're talking specifically about the Jacob Riis.
Yeah, exactly.
So like Fort Tilden, because it's a federal park, I don't think they're going to build way down the park.
Jacob
Riis,
yeah, which I tend to consider part of it. In my head, it's like
right. No, I mean that I know there's a petition. I know there's meetings happening trying to stop from happening, and I mean. It would be devastating. I mean, that community needs a safe space and like so many things in New York, we're hoping it doesn't get torn down. But no, I actually hadn't thought that I might have captured something that might not exist in the same way. So thank you for pointing that out. But I know, I mean, even that, like anything, all of us who've been here forever, like all of that has changed over the last, I remember, I was here obviously through Sandy and did a lot of volunteer work through that. There was a whole summer where we couldn't access Fort Tilden and it was just like a disaster. And we were all like hot dogs on Jacob Riis. And I was like, this sucks. I want to go to Fort Tilden. So yeah, I mean, I really hope that they can preserve that building and that space, but that's, I hadn't thought that might be a different dynamic moving forward in terms of photography, but that's a very good point.
And we will be right back. And now, back to our show.
What I was going to ask earlier, too, if we're talking about like the nostalgia and the history of these beaches, also like the question of like the beach being democratizing and access. I know like you make a point in describing this work to talk about like the diversity of the people who descend upon the beaches in New York, which I always tell people when it comes to surfing on the East Coast, like Rockaway is one of the most diverse places you'll surf on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So I do believe in that, but I'm also curious, like as a part of your research or as a part of your process, like are you researching the history of these beaches, Rockaway, Jacob Riis, Fort Tilden, and how does that inform the work that you're making? And is there a second part to this work? Especially like if we talk about like the queer community that gathers at the beach, specifically at Jacob Riis. I mean, that's a whole other statement in itself, right?
Yeah.
To create a series or to create a visual around that.
Right.
Any thoughts?
No, that's a great. I mean, in terms of research of the peninsula, I've definitely have learned so much about it and have done a lot of research. This is probably not like the most articulate answer, but I think at the same time, I'm not done shooting the series. I don't know that at the same time it's my place as a cis hetero woman to only document a queer beach. Like I don't know that I should take up that space. So it was never really a question to just do only one community. I wanted to sort of get the entirety of everyone I was seeing on the peninsula. I mean, the caveat being I was trying to avoid the very conservative parts of the beach that felt more Trumpy. Sorry, but I just was. I felt kind of more uncomfortable in those zones. But
they're not as affectionate anyway.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really hard
I'm just
question.
joking, listeners, by the way. I'm just joking. Everyone is affectionate. It's love for everyone here.
No, I mean,
I don't know if that's answering your question either.
No,
I'm
you have answered that.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
I think it's not. Yeah. I mean,
the answer is moving.
The answer is moving. And I was trying to do both representing the diversity of New York while also not tokenizing anyone, while also being like, I'm not a voice for every community. I can't be a voice. I shouldn't be a voice for every community. So how do I accurately photograph New York beachgoers in a beautiful, respectful way and know I'm never going to get a perfect picture of it because
I mean, like if there's anything, you taught kids, you understand, like if there's any kind of knowledge that I always want to pass on to people who are interested in any kind of image making, whether it be photography or something else. It's like, but specifically in the case of photography, it's like the camera in your hand gives you power.
Yeah.
Like there's power being behind the camera. And like, as we all know, I mean, a picture's 1,000 words. It's more than that, right? Like it becomes a part of an archive that can define a culture, ideologies, epistemologies, like so on. Like the ring only gets bigger, right? So it's like, this is a really hard question to answer, is who has the right to take a position where their voice has a platform and that voice can be misconstrued as a representation of something that they're not privy to the closest intimate way.
Right.
And like, I struggle with that. I think a lot of other photographers and artists struggle with that. And it's really hard because then, like we have questions. I mean, I remember like last summer when the BLM protests were happening and that was an enormous question. There were so many white photojournalists who were at the front of the line taking photos, and it was in a lot of people's eyes and very much in my own, like very voyeuristic, because then the question is who benefits, but then also at the same time, these images are important. Right. And so like, and they will define the archive. And of course, like people could argue and say, well, then the issue stems from something deeper. Like who do we put cameras in the hand, like, or who puts cameras in the hands of whom? Right. And like who has access to those kind of tools. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's an easy answer. I've always felt like as I've gotten older as an artist, I think like, in the past, I definitely shied away. Like I wouldn't take pictures of anything that I felt like I didn't have intimate knowledge of. I just think it's really important that I don't think like it's so black and white. Like it's very much like if you are able to contextualize what you are taking a photo of in a way that doesn't disservice it, but also make sure that it's very implicit that it's your perspective that you're coming from.
Right.
Like that's kind of what's important.
Yeah.
It's
a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
It's so difficult, I feel like, because it really depends on each body of work and the artist's intention and what they're bringing to it. It's interesting. Like I have a good friend who has done a lot of work on segregation and civil rights, but he's white, but he's seeped in knowledge of it. But there is a tension of like, what's okay?
Yeah.
What is okay for him to promote and to put out there?
Yeah.
It's sometimes I think like you said, it's very fluid too.
Yeah.
The conversation.
It's a
at the
moving
moment.
target.
Yeah.
Like all these questions are moving, the answers are moving.
Mm-hmm.
I think also like, as a cis het woman and a white woman, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, yeah.
I think also like, and then there were people, you know, just to bring back this example because it's easier maybe to jump off from here. Like there were also people who were saying, well, maybe the white photographers should be the people on the front lines because they're the people who can move in those spaces without endangering themselves or putting their bodies in position that expose them to violence. And I mean, not to say that this is what you were doing on this beach, taking pictures of lovers. But it is one of those things where it's like, I mean, I wonder if you've ever thought about how you can move through these public spaces and take photos of these folks without somebody blinking an eye or, you know, and like you have like, where are you leaning towards? Which is like, I don't want to show this work, or I'm not sure that this is a place for me, or you know what? I have a voice, and in the society with the frameworks we exist in now, like I can also take and make these photos. And should I be doing that? Question mark. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah.
It does.
Playing a little bit of devil's advocate.
No, I mean, I appreciate it. I mean, I wasn't unaware that I was able to do what I was doing based on my appearance. I mean, that was like, I know that I was not suspicious to people in a way that I'm sure maybe other photographers might have, someone might have side-eyed them or even gotten hostile. And yeah, that was, and I've had, I mean, no offense, I don't feel sorry for them, but I had like so many men be like, well, I couldn't have done this work. I was like, it's probably true. You're probably
guilty as charged. I mean, well, I
Tyler out on the beach.
I'm 6'3". I really think I would stick at like, look, I can't sneak up on anyone or anything. So it would just, like, I
think
no, you couldn't.
No, and I'm gonna have an imperfect answer, and
totally okay.
It's where it's like I was able to do something, obviously based on the fact that I'm not perceived as a threat to most people, or you know, not most people, but societally. But at the same time, had come up against like so many very white male dominated places that pushed back on me, that scoffed at me, that laughed at me. So it's like, you can navigate different like layers of privilege and both have a ton of it and then also come up against it and be like, the hell, what do I need to do to like get my work recognized or seen or shown? So not a great answer, but I also I think I thought a lot about who I was photographing this entire time, and none of this was ever lost on me. And if I had just made a book of only white people, that would have been like gross, because that's not New York. Like that was to me didn't make any sense. Like that, why would I only photograph white beachgoers? Because that's not New York City, and I was trying to paint a picture of New York City. And
plus, it would be really boring. Like,
also, like I mean, there are layers of privilege, like you're saying, and it's really hard because it's like I think. Yeah, people want to quantify and have hard answers. There are no hard answers in that regard. But I do think like looking at your work and hearing how you speak about your work or reading about it. And like, I think you said that like it really, this work attracted you because like you felt like you were seen and you wanted to show others like that you don't need to be jaded in New York City, that love and humanity is still here and all of these things. And I think like it very much informs like the way that you're navigating the layers and then how that becomes something visual. Right. And becomes a visual language. Yeah. But what I was going to ask, I mean, like at the end, I wanted to ask, you know, like how do you see this work existing, you know, in a greater archive of New York photography amongst people like Vivian Mayer and Diane Arbus. I mean,
time to put yourself up on the platform.
I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. I mean, Vivian Mayer is definitely a huge influence with this work and just my work. I just love her to death. I think she's brilliant. I mean, that would be a dream come true if that ever kind of made it to that sort of canon. Like again, recognizing there were white photographers, but like, Gary Winograd, phenomenal photographer, like took some of the most beautiful and chilling, both black and white and color photos. Harvey Stein, like I looked up to a lot of New York photographers for decades and decades. And so if it fits into some sort of like tiny canon of like, this was New York City beach life in the 2000s, like that would be super exciting. But yeah, also bringing it back to like the humanity of New Yorkers and how tender they can be when it's not the word that's often associated with the city and with who we are and how we interact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I want to ask, what were some of the lessons you learned by making this book? And are there things that you would do differently for the next book?
Yeah, I mean, doing a more for listeners or for just in general. I mean, and I'm sure you must know this if you're doing your MFA. You don't get an advance. I had to raise the money to do this myself. It is so expensive. It is so much money. That was another reminder of how privileged the arts can be and like why so many people aren't able to kind of make these dream projects happen. I had to raise half the funds for this on Kickstarter. There's no way I would have been able to do this book without crowdfunding. So that was a major lesson, and not to discourage anyone. Like I was thankfully able to do it, and I got such a groundswell of support. It was like shocking. I didn't think I would do as well as I did with it. So that was just one major lesson. Like, unfortunately, like everything, our passion projects need a lot of money. And I didn't have I didn't have backing. It was like, this all came from me and like working overtime to pay off the rest of the book on my own. That was a major lesson. I would definitely do one again in the future, but now knowing really what it's cost me, was just a big eye opener was one thing financially. And then what, like, a one woman show. I haven't made creative work in 3 months, like, because I'm just like promoting the book, shooting weddings, shooting headshots, promoting the book, trying to go to the beach in my off time. And so, it's like a good problem to have when you're finally in a good career place, but like I miss taking photos. So, if I can, I'm hoping to work myself to a place where I can start like paying a part-time assistant to help me do some of the more mundane stuff. But I would say you have to get really comfortable promoting yourself. So this podcast is wonderful. I've been like, I don't think, I mean, everyone said like, Erica, you don't sound obnoxious, but like, since I launched my Kickstarter, which was like spring 2021 until today, I've just been talking about this series. And it's like, in light of a mass shooting, in light of abortion, in light of Black Lives Matter, like every time I would voice myself, I was like, ugh, does this even matter? So like to live with both things, to live and like promote yourself as an artist, recognizing the privilege, also recognizing that you have to pay your bill. Like it's really complicated, and I don't have a good answer for what that feels like. So like that you can care about the world, be an activist, also make your art, and find time to make your art. So those were just big lessons. Like, I don't know that I have answers, but just like I'm juggling a lot, and I'm grateful for it, but it's a lot. So I would definitely do one again. But it's like been 2 years of work essentially to make a book. I mean, it's not a joke. No. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
I would say though, the work, particularly what you're putting in this book, is what we all strive for. And it's what reminds us what we go through all this shit for.
Right.
What all the difficulty, all the things that we have is to be able to one day lay on the beach with a loved one and share an intimate moment. And that's inspiration right there. And that's what is, I think, important. And I think you doing this work in light of all the things that are happening in this world, we need those things, because what's the point otherwise?
That's kind of what kept me coming back to shooting it, was like also having had this background in nonprofit work and working in activism and social justice for so long. It was like I needed beach lovers in a way. It was like therapy for me. It was hope. It was like people are still good. Like it was like, it was a silver lining in a way of New Yorkers. Like you'd hear something terrible, I turn off my phone, I would just go shoot, and you just see these like sweet moments, and you're like, okay, okay. And so it like kind of reinvigorated me to keep doing all the other things. So again, like that was also a hope with this work, that it would kind of make people feel the same way when they would look at a photo and be like, wow, this is like such a beautiful moment, and that we can, this how we are right now. We're like juggling a beautiful moment and a very ugly moment. And if you don't have enough of these, we're only going to be, so I think being able to appreciate joy is really hard right now, and I think we all feel guilty about it. But I think
it feels self-indulgent.
Yeah, and
I
it shouldn't.
that.
Like, because otherwise the other stuff is going to just burn us out, and we need little pockets of joy to like get
also,
through
like
it.
this kind of joy, like the kind of joy that you've like strived and successfully achieved with the images, and like I mean, it's also in itself an act of resistance, which I remind myself, because I can feel the same way too, where I'm like, nothing matters.
Yeah.
And like, and it feels self-indulgent.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, that's really not how life works.
Yeah.
And like our own happinesses and like appreciating joy, the small ones especially, are acts of resistance.
Right.
Like these photos, these gestures are like, there's still love in the world.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying.
Yeah.
It also, as a New Yorker, it makes me so fucking proud.
Yeah.
Like it really does. Like you see these images of beauty in New York and you're like, this place is fucking awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
It's such
so
a
proud to be
magical
from
city.
here,
And
you
like,
know?
I've just seen so many beautiful moments out there. And like, it's very heartwarming. It makes you so grateful to live here, so proud to be a New Yorker. And I'm going to answer a question I've been asked quite a few times. It's like, would I do this in another city? And like, the answer has always been no. This is only for New York. And I know a lot of the images in there don't have the buildings or like,
don't need it,
you know, but at the same time, like I've gone to other beaches over the past 7 years, and like, they're beautiful moments, but there is just something palpable. I think you obviously both know what I'm talking about, that like, is New York and is summer, and we're all like, oh my God, we have 3.5 months. And like, it just, so
I mean, it's crazy that you say that, because I guess at no point did I ever think to myself, what is she doing that shows us it's New York? Because I just looked through everything and just was like, this is very clearly New York.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
You don't need a building you don't need a skyscraper, a building, or an image of the subway to know it's New York. It captures something more ephemeral. And to me, I think that's a win. That speaks highly of your eye and your talents with this.
Thank you.
I was going to end on a really bad question. I feel like we should end it there.
We've covered it.
Because I was going to say, like, did you ever capture moments of lovers' quarrels?
Someone made that joke to me like a week ago. They're like, "Are you going to do beach fighters next?" And I was like,
"Beach fighters?
No, I'm not."
Well, you know what that would be? It'd be like Dad dragging some big cart with chairs and everything on it, and he's got like all the white sunscreen and kids screaming and crying. And
beach strugglers.
Knock on wood, like I've never knowingly seen couples like fighting at the beach. Like,
those fights
really
only happen when looking for parking.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Different. You got to be in a different place.
You're on the goddamn shuttle fucking platform, and you're like, "Where is this train? I'm hungry."
Totally.
But
I was actually going to ask, is there a future? And I was saying to Tyler on the phone again yesterday, I love taking, people always ask, do you drive to the beach? Because you're there so often. And I'm like, I kind of like taking the train. Like I catch a ride a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like an hour. You got to switch at Broadway. Yeah. It can be a pain sometimes.
The stairs at Broadway Junction will get you.
Why are the escalators always broken at MTA?
Do you know why? I know the answer why. You're supposed to stand in the middle of an escalator. You're not supposed to stand on the side, because if everyone stands on the side, it makes it lopsided and breaks it. So technically, you're supposed to stand in the middle, and no one's supposed to pass.
Tyler, I actually
'Cause I
get
always
mad
walk.
when people don't stand on
I
the
know.
side.
I want to walk. I'm like, move.
I felt the same way, and then I watched a Vox video.
This is a huge blow to my
on,
ego.
on YouTube. I watched a Vox video explaining what you're supposed to, what the etiquette is supposed to be
I
on
had no
escalators.
idea.
So
That's
wow.
hilarious.
Wow.
Mind blown.
I'm going to think about this for a while, actually.
Especially because they're so big and we're so impatient as New Yorkers to like catch our train.
But honestly, though, I'm like, if I surf like a good 4 or 5 hours and I have to go up the stairs at Broadway to
with a
get
board,
home.
if you had a board with you, it's even, oh my God.
Thank
I
God
can't
I
imagine.
leave my boards now out of the beach. But I have my dog. I have like a 20-pound dachshund.
Oh my God.
And so we're going up and I got my, like, I always pack way too much when I go to the beach. I don't know why. I have a whole studio there. But I'm like, I got like 50 pounds in my arms and I'm like, I take 2 steps at a time. Like, I'm Superwoman. I am Mulan. like, look at me.
I know that
Anyways,
feeling.
I can have a good meal today for sure. But I was gonna say, like, I love watching the slumped over bodies and like the tiredness of people riding the A train home after a good like Saturday, Sunday beach. You know what I'm talking about? Like it's like a 6
The beach
p.m.
nap.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yes.
everyone is dead. It's such a different energy than when you go in the morning.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
And it's so
Do
good.
I hear a collaboration forming here, maybe? Huh? Am I just saying? Like, maybe you guys do a book together. Just saying.
I've actually, I've taken photos of like couples on the train that are cute, but like beach nap, like
Yeah.
I have gotten a few people going and coming, and I
Yeah.
had people say like you should put those in the series, but they never fit. But there is definitely like,
something there.
if we're talking about studying behaviors of New Yorkers and the beach, like that's definitely a very specific, like you've got the person with the 8 bags and the umbrella and the board, and then you've got like the screaming kid. Yeah, I mean it's it's really special.
Yeah.
Well, Erica, this was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Fun conversation. And first, before we go, you got to plug. Where can our listeners get the book? How can they get it? And what events you have coming up?
Yeah, thank you so much. So the name of the book is Beach Lovers, published by Daylight Books. So you can buy it directly from me on my website, which is my name, ericareadeimages.com. All the major retailers, also Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a lot of local New York bookstores, which does also, for, again, another, like, when you're buying it directly from the artist, I'm getting all the proceeds, but sales in other places also help the artist because it means your edition is selling out and you are just like, you might make certain charts of like best sold art books for 20, so... I'm happy with any and all sales, but yes, they're even in the gift shop at the Rockaway Hotel. You can get one there. I actually am doing a party at the Locals Cafe on Friday, July 22nd.
Yay.
A little meet and greet, more casual. I had 2 events in June, so I'll have some photos there for sale, some books for sale, and I'll be signing some. And then I'm going to be doing like a really big solo show in November of the series, kind of like images from each year of the series and books. So yeah, I think other things are in the works, but those are like the 2 things that are coming up this year. And the little IG plug of my name, also Erica Reade Images. If you want to follow along, I'm very friendly. I'm Canadian after all, so I say hi to everyone.
It's been awesome.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate you coming on, and always feel free to send us stuff to promote.
I will. Thank you so much.
And Kat, awesome.
Yeah, thank you. This was amazing.
You passed the test. Now you get to run the show next time. And
Nobody can see me, but I'm.
She's grinning.
I'm blushing.
She's blushing too.
But thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This was awesome.
Like a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
No worries.
Yeah.
And listeners, don't forget to follow Swell Season Surf Radio on Instagram, and you can also go to swellseasonsurf.com. And just a heads up, we do have an event on the 21st. So the night before Erica's, you can go. We're doing a screening of Sweet Adventure at Syndicated in Brooklyn. It's free, open to the public, so can't go wrong there. Get your tickets, though. And we'll see you all down the line soon. And I got to thank our engineer, Joe, here. Thank you, Joe, for recording and keeping us in line. And Swell Season is recorded by the Newsstand Studio in Rockefeller Center at the heart of Manhattan and is distributed by the Swell Season Surf Radio Network. Yo.
I got an oldie you don't even remember. Ready for this one? He wears a blue serge suit with a belt in the back, no flare, no lair, just a belt in the back. A hip, hip. A hip, hip. You don't remember that? That's long before your time. It's even before my time. I read about it. I got another one for you. This one you might remember. Sure, you remember. Was it blue? No, no,